Hello everyone and welcome back to Tactics Board. It's a massive week for Norwich City. The East Anglian derby looms large on the horizon. They travel to Portman Road to face bitter rivals Ipswich Town on Sunday, and it feels like the sort of game that could decide the mood for a long time going forward after a difficult start to the season. But before then, there's the matter of West Brom's Carrow Road visit tomorrow evening. Of course, a lot at stake in that sense as well. Not only building momentum for that derby, but also getting even a first point at Carrow Road, let alone a first win. It feels like they really need to impress their home fans after what has been, a difficult start, particularly in front of them. Of course, coming off the back of a 1-1 draw against Stoke, that probably wasn't the most exciting performance, but not really a bad point when you look at how Stoke have started the season. West Brom also were pretty good at the start, but have gone winless in the last 3 games and will be desperate to get a victory themselves as they travel to Norfolk. You know the drill on Tactics Board. First of all, I'm going to take you through my predicted starting 11 for the game. Then we're going to look at West Brom, some of their characteristics and how the game might play out tactically. And then we're going to come on to whether it's time to release the handbrake really for Liam Manning, because as I mentioned with that Stoke performance, it's not been particularly exciting in terms of the style of play. And although the results have been okay at times, I think fans are wanting a bit more entertainment, a bit more proactivity from their team. They want to look like favourites in games. So I'm going to look at whether Norwich need to be doing that and how they could possibly do that. So we'll come on to that later on in the video. But first of all, here's the 11 I think Manning will pick for tomorrow's game. So I've gone for Vladan Kovacevic in goal, Jack Stacey, Jakov Medic, Harry Darling and Kellen Fisher across the back four, with Pelle Matson and Kenny McLean at the base of midfield, with Oscar Schwartau on the left, Ante Sienats in a sort of number 10 position, Jovan Makama on the right-hand side and Josh Sargent through the middle up front. Now, not too many changes from that Stoke game, and that's because I think Manning will have been pleased with a lot of what he saw. Obviously, he didn't feel that the performance was up to standard in terms of the control and the domination that Norwich showed. But clearly, when you looked at that team selection, bringing Liam Gibbs in, bringing Oscar Schwartau in, he wanted a bit more running ability in that side. He's talked a lot about behaviours and about how he wants that kind of desire and those intangible elements from his players a little bit more. I thought that team selection showed that, and given it was slightly vindicated by a point against Stoke as opposed to obviously the 3-2 loss to Wrexham that preceded it, I think he will have been encouraged by those elements. So if he's still focused on behaviours, which again he talked a lot about at his pre-match press conference, then that sort of team I think would probably stay similar. I think Schwartau was actually very good on the left-hand side. Again, it was kind of a lot of running and a lot of hard work for him. But when he got the chance to show his technical ability on the ball, I thought he was good. Kellen Fisher, obviously out at left-back after Manning had tried to keep a left-footer there in Jose Cordoba, and you certainly can't dispute that he did a lot better than Cordoba. Maybe his best performance of the season so far, Fisher. I thought he was very good on that left-hand side, and although I think having a right footer there maybe will hinder any progress they want to make in terms of being a little bit more proactive and attacking, and this lineup doesn't really suggest that they would find it particularly easy. I don't really see that they've got many alternatives there, so I've gone for Fisher. And then obviously the only change I've got in that team is Ante Sienats, who obviously Manning turned to first from the bench when he decided that Jovan Makama had started to tire a little bit after he started the game. Obviously, he scored the goal for Norwich at Stoke, and I actually felt that was maybe slightly premature, but clearly it showed how much Manning wanted to get Sienats on the pitch. I think although it's been a pretty tough start to the season for him, there were some flashes against Stoke. One very nice ball through for Josh Sargent that maybe he should have scored to get the winner for Norwich, to be honest. And he just brings that kind of physical profile that I think Manning likes, although for me, he still needs to look so much more switched on. He needs to get a lot more involved in the game. But the reason I've got him in this team is because I think Norwich will want to attack more. They'll obviously be at home, so the pressure will be there, and we'll come on to West Brom. But I think they'll probably allow Norwich to be on the ball more, and they'll probably sit slightly deeper than Stoke did, and the onus will be on Norwich to create chances. And I think when you've got that number 10 position as probably the chief area where you can do that. Having Liam Gibbs in there, who, yes, got through a lot of running against Stoke, actually hit the bar with quite a nice left-footed strike late on in the game. I still don't think he's that kind of creative type who can unlock defences and take the ball in tight spaces. I'm not really sure Seaman is that player either, to be honest. But in a squad kind of lacking it a little bit, and looking at Manning's preferences in terms of who he's played this season, it feels like Seaman is the most likely candidate to step in if you do want more of a creative type in that position, which I think he will. But otherwise, a pretty good performance from in terms of what Manning was looking for and in terms of what he wanted to change from that Wrexham game. So especially given how much he's talked about behaviours and those intangibles going into the game, I feel like it might only be the one change going into West Brom. In terms of the task that Norwich will face, I think in a lot of ways it could be a little bit similar to Wrexham. Obviously, although Wrexham have spent a lot of money and brought in a lot of new recruits this summer, they were kind of stacked full of championship experience and players who kind of knew how to do it, and probably in terms of style of play weren't too far off West Brom. I think long term, Ryan Mason has kind of spoken about the fact that he wants to play more of a possession-based style of play. He wants West Brom to dominate, and maybe in that sense it's kind of similar to where Norwich are, but particularly early in the season they managed to execute it a little bit better than their hosts have done so far. They will kind of sit in, they will be solid, and then they will be quite direct when they win the ball. They'll try to counter, which actually they were really, really good at doing under Carlos Corberán, but maybe have lost the ability to do a little bit ever since he left for Valencia last season. I think they've retained some of that quality, but not quite all of it. You look at the squad of players they've got as well, and it will be kind of one of those typical championship sturdy oppositions that then Norwich have to break down. So the question becomes whether they can create chances, and that kind of leads into our attacking discussion a little bit, because I think although they haven't even really shown that intent this season when they have had the opportunity to break down defences, that's also been a worry, and they haven't really had that connection between midfield and attack. And I think that's maybe where Manning does need to kind of take the handbrake off a little bit and be quite a little bit more open in terms of his approach. I think sometimes they try to maybe create avenues to go through on goal that then still leave them with a little bit defensively, and kind of think about that side of things. A lot of the tempo of it is very slow, and you don't really have that rotation. I think from what we've seen with Norwich in previous years, some of their best teams in possession, the rotation is such an important part of it. If you have a rigid structure, it's really hard to really create chances, because teams are good enough and teams are structured enough, as West Brom have been so far this season, to be able to deal with a minimum amount of kind of movement and rotation in those positions once they're set. And because they've done so much research and there's so much of that analysis that goes on, if there aren't unpredictable movements and players ending up in areas of the pitch where you don't expect them to, then you don't put defenders in uncomfortable positions. You don't make them think beyond the tactical plan that they've had going into it. And given Manning's talked a lot about how he wants his players to take on kind of individual thinking and make decisions for themselves on the pitch, I think we should be able to see more of that by now. And obviously that's the sort of thing that will take time. Maybe if that's Manning's approach, that's why it looks a bit more rigid. Maybe he'd like to see the players going into areas of the pitch where they're maybe slightly less comfortable, but he's still trying to kind of take the handbrake off for them in that sense, in terms of breaking away from the tactical ideas. And although Torop was very possession based, he wanted to create chances, he wanted to play out from the back almost every single time, he was still quite rigid in what he expected. The demands on the players were very structured and very clear, and even if they weren't working, and even if the players would have liked to break out of those restraints sometimes, at least it was clear what they wanted. So I think that's maybe where some of the problem is coming from in terms of the rotation, but they need more of that. And I think they also need a better connection between the midfield and the attack, and they kind of showed it a little bit against Stoke, just that goal, with how high Jack Stacey was on the pitch, the fact that Pelle Matson was able to link with Josh Sargent and get into those positions before he played a lovely pass for Stacey. Stacey obviously crosses, and actually, given I was talking about that rotation, where's Makama as a kind of notional right winger in that system? He was to the left of Josh Sargent, beyond Josh Sargent. So you need a bit of that rotation and you need that link. As for where that link comes from, that's kind of where I think Seaman could come in because, again, really poor start to the season. I don't think anybody could contest that, but he's clearly got some technical ability and he's liked very much by Manning. He also, at Rakov Shestakova, was good at scoring goals from a kind of number 10 position and bursting into the box and making late runs. So he should be effective there. He should be able to kind of hold the ball up as well and play with his back to goal, which is key when you're trying to kind of fire the ball into tight spaces and work on the edge of the opposition box. But he just hasn't really quite been able to do that. And obviously that's partly on him because we saw that he can do better last season. It's also clearly partly on the coaches to get him better into those positions, to give him a bit of belief and almost put a bit more of that confidence into his game. But I think getting somebody in that number 10 position, whether it's Seaman or someone else who can be that link between midfield and attack, can get them in the positions that they were in for that Stoke goal more often. That's all for today's episode, but of course we'll have all of your coverage from tomorrow's game across our channels. So go to pinkun.com/subscribe if you haven't already, and you'll have access to all of that lovely content. The next episode of Tactics Board will of course be before that dreaded East Anglian derby. So let's hope Norwich can pick up some momentum in this West Brom game to go into that one with a bit of confidence. Right, I'll see you then. Let's hope for 3 points tomorrow evening.